and how that's going to be helpful to our neighborhood. So I will keep you posted on that, and so that you can alert folks if they want to come down and testify. Just let our office know, and certainly when it's on, we'll let you know. So that if people want to view online, they're more than welcome to do that as well. So,
thank you, Councilwoman. We appreciate that.
thank you.
Good night. All right, Vince, you're up.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. I appreciate all your hard work and determination with your group there in West Mount Airy. I know PennDOT and the city, those officials that are on here tonight, definitely want to make sure that they can do whatever they can within reason, within their resources, to make your community safer, and better, for everybody, in all modes of transportation. So we appreciate the feedback from you and your group, your committee. Thanks, Representative Rabb, for your introduction, and for you, Councilwoman Bass. Appreciate your support. I'm sure the city and PennDOT officials also appreciate what you guys do as well. So yeah, I'll just jump into it. We first got engaged with Ann through PennDOT. So this is a PennDOT segment of roadway from Wayne Avenue up to West Allen's Lane. So that's why PennDOT is involved on this project. And originally, I believe you guys went to the city, had some discussions with the city. City referred to PennDOT. You guys put a formal request in to do a study, and that's how we got involved. We work as a consultant for PennDOT on some of their traffic-related activities and assignments. So let me share my screen, and we can get going. Let me know if you guys can see it. Can you see my screen, Ann?
Yes. Yes,
Excellent.
we can.
Okay, so yeah, represented by PennDOT today, as Ann mentioned, is Vince Sorbonne and Sharang Malaviega. And from the city of Philadelphia, I saw Vadim Fleisch and Rich Montanez on the call as well. I know they've been involved on this with your community on this particular segment of Lincoln Drive. So, and as Ann said, I'm with Traffic Planning and Design, the consultant that we're working for PennDOT at this point in time.
And so we also have Don Pimento from our PennDOT District 6 Legislative Affairs unit.
Oh, excellent.
Is on the call as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give a quick project background and recap for all those that may not have been involved or may know very little bit of what's going on. I know most of you probably are pretty informed and pretty engaged. I know Ann and her group do a real good job of keeping you guys posted on things. Mid-July 2022, that's when Ann and her group reached out to PennDOT in the city to have some discussions to open up the doors to try to figure out how they can help your community up there. Official requested letter was sent to the city and PennDOT in September of last year, looking for a study or review of the traffic safety and conditions out there on Lincoln Drive. That's when we got involved as PennDOT's consultant late in September to engage on this particular project. I know the committee met with the city, had some early discussions as a group, threw out some ideas. After that, in mid-October, we started our data collection efforts for things that we're going to need to look at along the corridor and at intersections to help us kind of focus on some of the key areas that you guys had mentioned and talked about with the city. We did have an in-person community meeting in mid-October with PennDOT and city representatives there. We got a lot of feedback from those that attended. We had boards that we put up at front, different segments along Lincoln Drive, heard some of the issues, some of the suggestions, ideas, all great feedback. You guys are there every day, traveling, using. So we wanted to hear from you to get those ideas, to get those thoughts, to get those issues that you see out there, and hopefully put them in front of us so that we can do something about some of them, most of them, probably not all of them, to be honest with you, because some of them are, beyond some of the scope that we have here. But we did our best for what we are trying to do here for the short-term improvements. We then did a field walk with a small group of City, PennDOT, and Ann's committee in December, just to get a feel for the actual conditions, get a feel for the roadway, get a feel for the travel, the vehicles, the interaction between pedestrians and vehicles, things like that. Get some firsthand knowledge of the corridor. And then over the spring and summer 2023, that's when we put together the short-term safety improvement plans that were prepared, that I'm going to go through with you all tonight. And now we're at the meeting tonight where we're representing PennDOT and the city to show what we're looking to implement out there over there the next few months and beyond. I'll touch upon some of the long-term stuff that we're doing as well, not just some of the short-term stuff that's been that I'll show you tonight. And again, I said PennDOT owns this particular portion. They have ownership of the portion of Lincoln Drive from from Wayne up to West Allen Lane. So that's just a recap. And again, if there's any thoughts or questions as I go through, certainly put them in the chat. I'll stop, pause, and hopefully answer or defer to my counterparts on the call to address some of the questions or thoughts that you may have as we go through. So some of the data that we collected, we took a look at the existing traffic signal plans that are out there, and they're maintained by the City of Philadelphia. The city owns and maintains the signals out along Lincoln Drive and throughout the city. Looked at the volumes along the corridor where we saw as you go to the north towards Allen's Lane, it's a little bit less of a volume. As you go south towards Wayne Avenue, obviously the volume increases. There's more arterials and streets that feed into Lincoln Drive that then head down into Lincoln Drive into the city. So that's where the volumes get a little bit heavier as you go south along Lincoln Drive. We took a look at the traffic turning movement counts and the through movement counts at the intersection, all the signalized intersections, just to get a feel for the volumes and the directions people were going, so we can have a better idea on some of the analysis and operations that we looked at. Looked at some of the crash data for a 5-year period that was available when we started, just to see if there was clusters, if there was issues, what those issues may have been, what some of the cause, what some of the contributing factors may have been, things like that. Another one we looked at speed along a few locations along the corridor. I think we looked at 4 or 5 different locations along the corridor. Again, the speeds as well as the volumes were greater to the south, as we noticed, and to the north they weren't as high as you get more into the true residential area to the north towards Allen's Lane. But we did take a look at that, and that was kind of some of the things that precipitated some of the recommendations that we have come up with on the plans. And obviously, and as I mentioned before, the community input on here on the right, this is just one of the boards that we used at our meeting when we met with everybody. We got ideas, thoughts, questions, suggestions, as what you see on these sticky notes. That's what we received, and we took them all into always consideration to see what we could do within the regulations of the specific roadway, within PennDOT's regulations, city regulations, and things like that. So obviously you can't do everything that people think we can do and ask for, but we definitely consider it, don't dismiss it. We make sure there are things that can be installed within the regulations of the governing bodies, in this case PennDOT and the city. Again, we did the field walkthrough as well and got a lot of the information too when we went down the field walk. So I'm going to exit out of I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to share something new. It's something better I'm going to zoom in on each of these plans. I have 5 plan sheets that I'll zoom in a little bit closer. Can't really do that in the presentation, but I'll pull up some plans here. Give me a second. Hopefully I can pull them up without too much of an issue. Yeah, the new screen share. Looks like a plan sheet.
We see it.
Excellent. Now I'm going to start from the north and work my way south, and talk about some of the intended improvements that we're going to look to install. Both PennDOT and the city, there's going to be dual responsibility for some installation of the items that were called out on the plans here. So Allen's Lane here on the north side, working our way south from left to right on the screen. This is just a schematic plan of Lincoln Drive with all the side streets. We show driveways. We have some existing signs that are in like a light scale. All the proposed items are more in the darker scale and text color line weight, as you can see, just to give you some reference on what we're looking to do, what PennDOT and what the city's looking to do here. So our first major improvements here in advance of Mount Airy Avenue, where it's a 2-way stop control on the side street on Mount Airy. You have pedestrian crossing. We're looking to calm traffic down as we get on the approaches, on both approaches, northbound and southbound, with a speed table, as you can see here. Highlighting here and here. Obviously, all the signing that goes with it. So we're looking to do that in advance of this particular intersection at this point. Again, the signs that go with it. I'm trying to think of what else on here. Some additional curve warning signs. We're going to add, these are called chevrons. They're like those small arrow signs. We're going to replace and add more of those on all the curves along the corridor. We're also going to do, and along the whole corridor, we're going to look to put, it's called rumble strips, and there's a little grooved portions of the roadway that you see. If you ride over them, you feel a little shaking of your car. The type that we're going to use are sinusoidal, so which means they're going to be a little bit less of a noise distraction as you would normally hear from a typical rumble strip. So that's going to definitely help keep the noise down, but you're still going to feel that little jolt in your car if you're driving on or over the double yellow lines and even the white edge lines that are out there along the curb lines and between the parking and the travel way. Those are going to be in both locations along the whole corridor from Allen's Lane all the way down to Wayne Avenue. So that's going to help, people hopefully stay within their center of their travel lane, and they're not being felt, that uncomfortableness of being, a little shaking that you get when you ride over them. So that's going to be for the whole corridor. This grade area, as you're going to see on a couple of the sheets too, that was a treatment that PennDOT put in 2019. It's that high friction surface treatment. It gives the cars, when it's a wet condition, a little bit more traction out on the street if you're traveling down, and it helps alleviate some of the slipping or sliding that people may happen if a normal surface is out there, especially going around curves. PennDOT typically puts them in areas around curves to help vehicles travel a little bit safer around curves. So I'm going to continue on. And again, north to south from the left or the top side of the sheet to the bottom or the right side of the sheet. Mount Pleasant was up here. We're working down towards Emlyn. So some of the short-term stuff, we're going to update all the signing in here and markings to make it. A lot of the stuff is worn out or missing out there. No turn on red signs. We added 2 of those. Additional do not enter signs so people aren't driving the wrong way. Providing some lane use control signs. Some one-way do not enters again to help alleviate any wrong way driving. Do not block the intersection sign so people don't pull up. and block the people going northbound into M1 to go westbound on M1. So we're looking to do that and upgrade some of the crosswalks here at M1 that are worn out, some of the stop bars and lane configurations too. Again, this is short term. And what I mean short term, this is fixes that PennDOT and or the city can do without a long design process where money's got to get funded and there's a process, a preliminary design, final design, and sometimes it could take several years to do. So short-term improvements are something that PennDOT and the city can do a little bit easier. There's materials, there's signs, there's markings, things like that are a little bit easier to secure, to get resources for, to have money for, to do them. So that's when I mean short term. It's not that they're going to be out there for a limited amount of time. It just means short term. It's easier to install, to get things done a little bit quicker than some bigger, larger project that may be more expensive and take longer in the design process. As you can see here on the corners where we have the boxes for the no parking up near the corners, we're going to install flexible delineators. They're the about 2.5 foot upright white posts to help alleviate people parking in those corners. To help, as again we were talking before we got started, with some of the daylighting at the intersections. So that'll help cars from actually parking all the way up to the corners and to the intersections. So they'll be installed at all those corners in and around intersections. We're looking to add a speed feedback display, and actually I didn't mention that on the previous plan too. On the southbound side, after you get down past Mount Pleasant, we're looking to put a speed feedback display. It's one of those electronic signs that you see. It'll post what your speeds are as you're driving along. So we're looking to put one southbound approaching the Emlyn curve here, and then one northbound as you're approaching the intersection with them and on the northbound. And what they look like, it's something like this here. You've probably seen them around either in the city, or if you drive out in the suburbs, or they're in some location. So it gives you what the speed limit is out on the roadway and a static sign. And it also gives you a dynamic display of what your speed is of your vehicle. So hopefully that's something, if someone is driving along and they're not really paying attention to how fast they may be going, this will alert them, and they'll say, oh, geez, I'm going a little bit faster than I should be, or what I thought I was going. So those are going to be part of what the city's going to install, as well as the speed tables. The city is going to install the speed tables and the speed feedback displays, and PennDOT's going to be responsible for all the rumble strips, marking, signing that goes along with the project. And I'll mention that at the end as well when we talk about what an anticipated schedule looks like. Again, additional chevron signs alerting drivers of the curves that they're driving, just adding or upgrading to what may be out there already. Some of them may be faded, missing. So just to alert people where they're at on the roadway. Trying to think
Vince,
what else.
Hey Vince, we have a couple of questions in the chat that not that I want to get into answering them right now, but we have a couple about could you mention the lane separator curb in the center turn lane to prevent passing? And then also, could you mention the transverse rumble strips?
Yes, absolutely. Good call, Vince, because I would have easily have skipped over them. So in some of the areas, we were able to put these lane separator delineators within the center lane areas, so people aren't using the areas for passing. We have to be very careful with that, where we can do that, based on driveways that are out along Lincoln Drive, when there's quite a number of them. So we were limited in what we can do, but we put them where we could to help alleviate, again, some of that passing issue that was brought to our attention at the community meetings, and again, what we may have seen when we were out there. The transverse marking, these are just markings. They're not really the grooves, these horizontal that go across the lanes. Again, they're a pavement marking, but they're a little bit higher than a typical, pavement marking. It's fairly flat. That just gives you a little bit, again, of alert of what, you're coming up to a curve, a situation. We got these slow legends as well, alerting people to slow down as you're coming around these curves that you're approaching. So thanks for bringing that up, Vince. Hopefully I've clarified some of that for people. And I will move on to the third sheet. Again, moving from north to south, left to right on the sheet. From Carpenter, again, the shaded area again is high surface friction treatment that PennDOT did in 2019. This is just a little detail of the transverse pavement rumble strips. So I was just talking to you about the ones that go across the lane. Again, it's just a little, like an inch or so above the roadway. Gives you a little bit of a feel for that's different than normal roadway, just to alert you of something that's coming up, a curve typically, and in this case, that's what it's used for. Let's see. We're looking to add another speed table here between McCallum and Green. Again, we got to be careful where we put these. We like to put them, and they're recommended to go in straight segments of roadways. And that's where we feel as engineers and regulations indicate that as such are appropriate places for these speed tables or cushions or slots, as you see in other areas around the city. So again, we're looking to put one here. It goes across the full width of Lincoln Drive between McCallum and Green. So we're doing that there. Again, the signing that goes with it to alert drivers. We go down to the next segment, again, north to south, left to right, between Green and Horder Street. Again, a lot of signs for the center left turn lanes that you see, curve signs that we're adding. We're adding a decent amount of those transverse rumble strips as well. Again, to reiterate, we're doing the rumble strips along the center lines and the edge lines as you go through the corridor from top to bottom. We're looking to put some more of those center lane delineators here, again, to alleviate any thoughts of people trying to use that center left turn lane as a passing lane. This is an area too that we work pretty closely with PennDOT and the city to do. Today, you have a very long left turn lane going northbound to turn left onto Green Street. And a lot of feedback we got where people were using the centermost through lane to pass people in the right lane, even though it was a left turn lane. They used it all the way up and through the intersection. So not really an ideal treatment because the left turn lane, if you're coming from Horder Street, if you're going in the left lane going northbound, you have to get over to the right if you're not going to make a left on Green. So we wanted to better define this particular area to get drivers over to a single lane prior to getting to the curve going northbound. So you see these arrows, these lane transition or lane reduction arrows are indicating to people, along with the signs here too, that supplement those markings, get people to go into the outermost lane. So they're traveling in one lane going northbound. You have a center turn lane here now to go on the side streets or to get into any of the driveways. And then the left turn lane has been shortened and defined more with a taper area. So it's not as long as it was before. We didn't feel that there was a need for an unlimited left turn lane that was really being used illegally by some to pass vehicles and to go through the intersection. So we did a lot of work in here. Again, we have some transverse rumble strips again to alert people. We have the slow pavement markings here to help people, again, realize what they're coming into. Signs that we have here as well. trying to think of what else in here. I think I touched on a lot of the things in here. Again, reiterating all the daylighting at the corners where you have the X in the boxes where people sometimes don't really obey and they park in there. We have the delineators in those locations as well. Gives a lot of sight distance for people exiting driveways, exiting side streets, things like that, and pedestrians, the visibility for pedestrians if people are making turns on these side streets or turns from the side streets. Okay, we're going to go from Hoarder down to Wayne. Again, we have additional speed feedback displays. This is another area where we saw a lot of, we saw the speeds a little bit greater than any part of the cars. So we're trying to do a little bit of treatments here too. We have the speed feedback display here, as you see here in the detail, both southbound and northbound in this location, just north of Wayne, just south of Hoarder. And we have another speed table here along this straightaway segment to alleviate some of the speeds coming from Wayne as you're going into the curve heading towards Porter Street. So we did that, obviously the signs and pavement markings that go with it. And then another treatment here where we have a very wide throat here at Upsall Street. It's basically signed today, no left turns, but it's so wide and open, people are making that left-hand turn illegally, causing issues with traffic and crashes and things like that. So we wanted to do something at least in the short term to see how it works out. We had some discussions, on our walk. We had some discussions with the city and PennDOT. What can we do at least short term without making anything permanent to see if it's going to work? So we've added these delineators with curb. They have a little plastic curb that these delineators that are the vertical delineators sit on, kind of have them deflecting to the right, which is really what they should be doing. We also, if they ignored this, what we did as an extra treatment is we did the same thing along the center line. We're putting a center line, the plastic curb separator with the yellow delineators up in the double yellow to alleviate people from making that left turn lane illegally across Lincoln Drive and creating a hazardous condition. So thought that treatment was pretty good. Again, we'll see how it works out. If in the long run, the city wants to add some sort of permanent treatment here, such as, concrete bump out, things like that, that could be an option long-term to do that. So that's the end of the plans portion of it. I can continue to step through and talk about some of the anticipated schedule and then what we're looking to do long-term as well, if that's okay. Is there any questions right now in the chat? If not, I can hold off until I get done.
I think we have a bunch of questions right now, if we could, and then go on to the plans.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a pause here, and if someone wants to.
Well, the first thing we'd like to say, just voicing something, is there a standing ovation button available?
I mean, hey, we're just doing our job. We're trying to, again, like as I introduced in the meeting, trying to help residents of your community and the city as a whole to make things better, make things safer, and to eliminate, or not eliminate, to help alleviate. We're never going to eliminate speeding because we have people that are going to drive like crazies out there. Or there's a Vision Zero that PennDOT has, and there a lot of states have, for reducing or eliminating fatalities and injuries, serious injuries. Hoping to get to that. This is just a step in helping try to do that. And, it takes, community groups like yourselves to help bring attention to some of these safety issues within your own community. And, we're just one of the resources for you guys to lean on to help kind of promote that. So.
Thanks, Vince. We'll just take a few questions. Joe Winter, the executive director of WeMan, is going to take some questions, and then we'll get back to the plans.
Sure. Shall we go through? Folks want to raise their hands if you have specific questions, Anne, or you want to go?
Yeah,
through
I think so. That would be good.
Okay. I'm not seeing any
I see a
hands.
couple, I see a couple hands up.
So
I
I'm
don't know if
looking
you want
through.
me to call
Oh, I see.
people out
I
or.
see them. Sorry. There was looking through everybody. Scott Robinson.
Yes, hi there. I've had a lot of trouble crossing Edmund Street, right where it intersects with Gresham Street. There's a crosswalk there, but the cars fly down that part of Edmund Street so fast that pedestrians already committed by the time motorists see us. You know, I'm walking across the intersection with my dog last week, and two cars just went right around us, but feet of
Yeah.
us.
And Scott, you mentioned Emlyn and Gresham. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna put that on like a sidebar table. Our study did not involve that. I think the city will be better to address that, you know, separately. I hear your concern. Again, that wasn't part of our particular study area and focus area, but if that's a concern, definitely bring that up with the city. Ann can pass that along to
It
some of the
is.
city folks.
Emlyn is currently being
Under review.
studied. Yeah, it
Okay.
is definitely. So let's keep our questions just for
Yep.
the Lincoln Drive plan right now.
Yep.
Since there's a lot of people are expressing concern about the impact of this plan on side streets, and if people will go around using Lincoln Drive onto side streets. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of how traffic calming efforts impact?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, people take the path of least resistance, right? If it's something going to be easier, quicker, people are going to do it. You know, you're on Waze, you're on Google, whatever you're using takes you, quicker way to get there. Our hopes are it won't do that. I don't think we went completely overboard where we have a ton of areas where, people are going to have to completely stop and or slow down. We've picked a select few areas that we thought were the most manageable and the most impactful. We did take some counts on some of the side streets when we're doing some of our data collection, so we can always take a look if that's a concern or if that's a perception. After these improvements get installed, the agency typically takes a look at some of the potential, cut through, if you will. I'm going to use a cut through as a word, but I don't anticipate there being that much, if any. But again, people are going to take that path of least resistance. But we did take some before counts along some of the other main roads, that parallel Lincoln, just for that purpose. If there's something we need to look at after and do an after count, we would have that information to compare.
So I want to say something to you, Vince. I already do that, and this is why I already do it, because the way that because there's one lane going from kind of Green through McCallum, that now I was there at 2:30 in the afternoon, and it was backed up to Horder Street all the way up to Carpenter Lane. So I'm not going to wait. No, I'm not going to sit through lights. So that was one thing. And then at rush hour, it's even worse. So I do that actually. I cut through the streets. I know the street, so I know my way home. But the other question I had, so I just wanted to give you that feedback, sort of unintended consequences of what happens when people are in the light when it turns red, in the intersection when it turns red. Also, that's the other
Toby,
thing.
I'll touch on that too with some of the long-term things we're doing. So if I don't remember, bring it back up to me.
Excellent.
I'll
The other thing was I wrote a question, which was, are there any long-term plans to make the lights at Green and McCallum put a left turn signal in? Because that also is very dangerous to try to turn left without being able to see the far lane. That's how my mother got into an accident. So I just want to ask that.
I'll touch on that too with the long-term stuff, Toby.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right. You got it. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to go on to long-term now? Ann, you want to
Sure.
take?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
Paul,
good.
one
No,
moment.
before-
One of our co-leads, Paul Gill, has a question. Paul,
Sure.
go. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, Vince. I wanted to know where the rumble strips are going to be placed and what effect that they have on traffic calming.
So the rumble strips, as I mentioned, are going to be along the whole corridor from Allens down to Wayne. They're going to be placed in two locations. They're going to be placed along the white edge lines that you see on the road that keep their travel lanes separated from the parking lanes. And they will also be in the center double yellow lines that you see along the center of the road, separating northbound and southbound traffic. And they tend to provide, again, just they alert drivers that if they're driving too fast or they're not paying attention to get into their lane and pay attention is a primary focus of what those rumble strips are. So they provide that safety to alert drivers that you're either going too fast or you're not paying attention and you're not in your lane where you should be. So that's their purpose.
Hey, Vince, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just
Sure, jump in.
a little bit. Okay, so it's a great question, and in the chat there was a question about the reduction of some of these countermeasures, what reduction that we can get. So FHWA is the Federal Highway Administration. The Department of Transportation Federal does studies nationwide on these countermeasures, and so, for instance, the centerline rumble strip is specifically looking, and the edgeline rumble strip, looking at vehicles that, like Vince said, are going into the other lane of travel or running off the road. So the FHWA has, through their studies nationwide, has proven that there's a 40 to 60% reduction in head-on opposite direction and head fixed object run off the road crashes when you have the rumble strips on the center line and edge line. For the dynamic speed displays, FHWA has proven that there can be up to a 50% decrease in severe crashes on roadways that have dynamic speed displays. And high friction surface treatment, there is an 83% reduction in wet crashes on the curves and a 55% reduction in total crashes. The transverse rumble strips that go across the entire lane, there's been proven for a 25% reduction in speed and crashes for the area right around the transverse rumble strip. So, you know, there's just some of the data that is available from FHWA, and you can Google this yourself to see those types of things. So,
Vince, somebody just asked, what's the crash reduction factor for speed tables?
that is a good question. So the actual crash reduction, FHWA has not completed a study on the reduction in crashes for speed tables, but what they have shown is that the reduction in speed, if you're on a 35 mile per hour roadway, you're getting those vehicles down to, below the 10 mile per hour allotted speed that you're allowed to go over the posted speed limit. So from 35 to 45 is what we're seeing. And in the actual area of the speed table, we're seeing an even lower, sometimes even lower than the posted speed limit. So, but that data is still being collected.
Thanks, Vince.
The diversion factor, there's always going to be a diversion factor when you introduce speed tables. So, that is a concern. always when speed tables are introduced. We do look at, like Vince said, we do look at counts, and we look at the counts that are on the road before. We look at the counts that are on the road after. And obviously, if there's a huge difference, those vehicles have to be going somewhere. So that's when we would want to take a look at and see where they're being diverted to.
Vince, do you think this plan is going to be diverting the joy rides that we get from the rally cars at 2 a.m.?
Well, we certainly hope so. You know, it's not just an issue in Philadelphia. It is an issue in most major cities, and you know, it's a hard one to tackle, right? Police enforcement is really the first part of that, and if they're not available because of all of the other things that they have to cover, it's important that, you know, we get education out there, and that also will help. You know, I really think that, like, with you guys being so involved, that is going to help, that you get those calls to the proper people, that they know that it's happening.
Thank
But
you.
that should, right? I mean, a speed table is definitely going to, the speed tables being placed, and the rumble strips, the traffic calming, all of those things have been proven to push them away to other areas. They're not going to want to do that.
Great. So shall we move on to the?
Yeah, I'll
the
move on. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Vince, for
Yep.
those statistics. Appreciate it. All
Yep.
right, let me jump on to some of the long-term improvements. So concurrently while we're doing this work here, we're also working funded by PennDOT as well. We're looking to upgrade and modernize all the traffic signals along the corridor. As you can see, a lot of the equipment's could be outdated, could be old, could be missing some things. One of the big things, you know, I noticed, obviously, when I was out there and doing the review of the corridor and reviewing some of the crash information we got, some of the contributing factors or some of the causes and types of accidents, I think contribute a lot or attributed to the existing signals that are out there today that aren't as visible. They're not overhead. They're not within, you know, vision of, you know, drivers that you would normally see on a 4-lane roadway, you know, with parking. So we're going to look to modernize all the signals on the car, get some overhead signals installed along both Lincoln and the side streets, because a lot of the side streets also have some vertical curves, have trees and things like that. So when you're coming down, you may not see the signals off to the left or to the right that are out there today. So we're looking to definitely improve that for sure. So again, through the mast arms, I'll, you know, put the signals overhead. We're looking to add pedestrian countdown signals for all crossings, both side street and Lincoln Drive. You see them around town. You may see, I think there may be an intersection or two up there that has them today, but they'll be at all the intersections. The audible pedestrian push buttons, you know, for those that may be, you know, visually impaired, those are mandatory now by the ADA. So they're going to be going in at all the intersections as well for the crossings. Anywhere where there's ADA ramps that are not in compliance, they'll be upgraded to ensure compliance, that there's tactile strips, that they're the percentage, the grades of the ramps are within design criteria. Obviously, additional signing and pavement markings that go along with that, you know, updating all the markings and signs that may need to be replaced or are missing out there. And then Emlyn Street, which is a big one. I know this was a big discussion we've had and we continue to have. Basically today, it almost acts like a roundabout. We talked about a roundabout. Roundabouts are awesome, great. I love them. I promote them. it's just a project. It's a big project from a design wise and construction wise. It has to be programmed. Their money has to be found. So what we're going to do, at least in an interim, to see how it works out, is to make that a traditional four-way intersection. You know, right now it's pretty tricky. It's pretty unique intersection, as you'll see in the city. Confusing to some of the newer folks that may go through it, and even people that have gone through it almost on a weekly or daily basis. So we do have to do a little work there, a little design work, a little roadway work to readjust some of the curb work there. We're going to look to get some survey, and we have to get some survey in that area so we can do some of the roadway plan designs for that intersection. So everything's going to be planned to be done within the physical right of way that PennDOT and the city owns. There's not going to be any need for any acquisition or property takes, things like that you would normally see when you have like an intersection reconstruction. There's a lot of room, as you know, within that intersection. So we're looking to make that move at least as the next step after we get through the short-term improvements that I shared with you guys earlier. The next part is in the long-term strategies is trying to make that a four-way intersection. So just an FYI too, some of the neighbors that live in that area, as part of the process for a surveyor to go out there and get the data, you'll be getting a letter notifying you. It's basically going to be a PennDOT form letter. It's going to say, hey, PennDOT needs to get in here to do some work and some study work, survey work in this case, in this area, just so you guys are not alarmed by someone being out there with instruments and taking field data and capturing what's out there at that intersection. So Vince, did you want to jump in? Looks like you wanted to. Did you want to say something?
Oh no, I'm actually reading some of the chats, Vince, so that we can
Okay, cool.
maybe get.
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's what we have from a long-term improvement plan. I think it's definitely going to be a big help. Long-term, as I said, short-term before, something we could do relatively quicker and easier and smaller scale. This is going to take some time, and I'll get into some of the time frames. Not too long, but in my terms, your terms there, it depends on what you think is long-term and how far out things are. But we do have to run through a design process for what we're doing there, and we're actively and concurrently doing that work now. So it's not like we're.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure, Ann.
For Emlyn Street, could perhaps a long-term plan be a traffic circle? And if so, how much would it cost?
Yeah, the roundabout. Yeah, we use the term roundabout. Circles or things that they look like circles. People call them circles because that's what they think they are. Roundabouts are a little bit different. They're definitely a great intersection improvement. To get something programmed by PennDOT is several years to take. Get it from an idea to on a traffic improvement plan to getting funding for it. I mean, that could take several years to do, and then the design's usually another year or two, that process, and then construction usually takes a year. I think we threw some initial numbers. I forget what the numbers of the costs were. I want to say, I don't know, 3 to 5 million was somewhere in the ballpark of what that would cost. So they're not cheap, but they're great. They're great. Great intersection treatments in certain areas. They got to be specific to certain traffic conditions and things like that. Rich, I think you want to jump in. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. So, and just to give you economy of scales, if anybody's familiar with the intersection down at 20th Penrose Packer, the city and PennDOT are going to put a roundabout there, $6 million. And that took us 5 years of design. So it's nothing, it's not a simple solution. There's a lot of negotiations, and in that case, it was SEPTA was involved. I have a SEPTA depot there, 400 buses a day come out of that depot, which are going to use it. So it did add a little more complication, but that kind of gives you an idea of the amount of money we're talking to do a roundabout. And I was quite shocked too when I saw the bids come in. So, but that gives you an idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we don't want to walk away from this project or even the next one just to leave it as it is today, because we know it's not what it should be. So
Yeah, I mean, I think we're committed to do both the short term and what we're calling the midterm. We are still committed to talking to PennDOT to see ultimately a roundabout, but we do have to look at the funding and when to program. And Vince Zerbone, correct me if I mean, anything we do, at least a roundabout, we will have to put it on the tip. And
Right.
you're looking at a 5 to 7 year process.
Yeah, so the, the feasibility study alone, looking at, what right of way has to be taken, if any. I'm not saying there is, but there always is with a roundabout. So just the feasibility study, does it fit? Yes. In terms of area, we can fit a roundabout there. We already know that, and so I may as well say this, right? And started this by calling Sharang and I on July 5th of 2022 and started this conversation for all of this. We did look at the feasibility of fitting a roundabout, looking at how roundabouts are funded. They're either done through the TIP or they're done through highway safety improvement funding. For HSIP to fund a roundabout, it has to meet criteria that is very strict for FHWA, and unfortunately, it does not meet that at this intersection. So the funding that we would have to go after would be through DVRPC, the state, and DVRPC could get federal funding for a regional allotment of money, but that is on the tip and that takes longer. In any case, and regardless how the funding would come, it's a 5 to 7 year process of getting to the point of design. And
Gotcha.
then another 2 years to 3 years of construction. A roundabout can cost anywhere from $3 million to $7 million, depending on the size. And this, like Vince said, this estimate would be in the $5 million range.
Thank you.
Some of the chat, like you see, I'm having trouble scrolling through all of these chats, but and Jeanette, thank you for answering some of these. If there's anything that you don't see answered, if you can either go through Ann or I will put my email in the chat, and anybody can email me at any time.
I think a number of people have asked why we won't be getting automated speed cameras on Lincoln Drive. And Nicole Brunet actually is here from the Bicycle Coalition just to say that they're not legal anywhere but Roosevelt and Boulevard and highway work zones right now.
Right.
And they're working to legalize them in Philadelphia, and you can come on the train with us to Harrisburg on October 3rd, and I'll be sending out an email about that.
And to further say, they if they don't get extended, they expire at the end of this year. So we will no longer be able to issue tickets January 1st if that we don't get an extension on that bill.
Yes, so please do sign on for that.
Oh, you wanted me to continue?
Yes, please.
All right. So anticipated project schedule. This is what we're looking at, right now. The short term, that the plans that I stepped through, the PennDOT work, they're looking to commit to doing that in the fall of this year. They have an on-demand contract that they utilize to do this type of work. And the city's work, which is the speed tables and the speed feedback displays, Rich, and you may want to touch on this, they got to secure the funding to get that work done, but it's looking like into next year. So We were hoping for sooner than that, but again, coming up with a plan, getting consensus, finding resources to do it, and funding, those are the things, we're in a good spot now. We have a plan. Now it's the execution part that we're looking to move into at this point.
Can I ask a quick question? How much does this plan cost?
Vince, did you run that through your contract at all?
Yeah, sure, man, you're on the call.
Yeah, I took a look at it. It's about
Oh, no better
$200,000 worth of improvements just for the signing, pavement marking, and rumble strip work. That's not including the vertical deflection or the dynamic speed display sign.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hey.
And then I'll touch on the long-term stuff. What I talked about, the long-term improvements would be the signal plans that we're doing. We are going to look at, improving some of the bottleneck areas that Toby was describing. We do look at the operational analysis. We look at, pedestrian crossing times, the combination of those things. So we'll look at those things, the timings of the intersections and how they're timed. So we usually do that per the speed limit of the roadway. So that'll, if people are going too fast, they're not going to go through and progress along Lincoln Drive as they think they should, because, we do, some of the analysis work based on the posted speed limit out there. So that'll definitely help. But you want to make sure you move platoons, and you don't want to try to limit the bottlenecks where you can. So that's some of the things we'll be looking at doing with those plans. So again, they're currently under design, PennDOT funding them. Hopefully approval by next fall. We then hand that off to the city. The city has a grant, a state grant. I call it a GLG grant. It's a Green Light Go grant to do this type of work, to construct this type of work. That grant expires in 2026. So they have a few years, to get the design done, which we're doing through PennDOT. And once we're done, the plans will get turned over to the city. They manage it. They put it out to bid. And they're also going to use the ARLI grant, automated red light enforcement money, which we were just talking about, the red light enforcement and speed. That money that gets collected from those tickets going to a program, and the city has a grant that'll take care of the physical roadway work that'll be getting done at Emlyn and Lincoln Drive. So that grant will help pay for that work. So while they have some funding for some things, they again are looking to get supplemental funding always to do these things. So I can see construction being out in 25 and 26 for the signal improvements along the corridor. So again, those are some of the challenges we face. These are some of the hurdles. These are some of the process things that we typically have to go through as engineers and agencies. So we like sometimes to be faster, but sometimes we're, restricted by some of the things and process and procedures and approvals that are part of that process that tend to slow us down and not get us out to the street as fast as we typically would want to. So that's what I have right now.
Vince, can you one of the questions? Can you talk a little bit more about the exact signal modifications that we're doing at, I believe that was M1. Was that the question, Scott? Could you just jump right in there, Scott?
Yeah, M1. What was that? I'm sorry.
I was asking about.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
About the intersection of Emlyn Street and Gresham Street, that little loop street that connects Emlyn to Allen's Lane at the bridge, the railroad bridge. There's a crosswalk there, and drivers just barreled on that road so fast that by the time they see us, we're already committed.
Yeah, is this on Emlyn itself, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think the city's studying that portion of Emlyn. We're not in that area with this project. The city's under current study of that particular roadway, so that'll be that'll be brought to their attention if they're not looking at it already.
Sure.
Thank you, Scott.
Gwyneth,
If I could just correct one thing as well. So there was, I believe at the beginning of this, we talked about the state road being from Wayne to West Allen, and the state-owned roadway actually starts at Cliveden and goes to West Allen. So I just want to make that
Okay. Thanks, Vince.
correction.
Gwyneth, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because I can see a lot of people have asked it besides me. Will the signal improvements include left-hand turn signals at McCallum and Green? Because I think plenty of people have raised that in the chat, and I'm just curious whether that's part of the signal improvement. I know the new ones on Ridge are great, and I'm just wondering if we might see something like that.
Yeah, great question. It's one of the analysis we do when we're doing our design work. So we have analysis worksheets based on, volumes, number, lane, speed, things like that. So that is part of the equation when we're looking at our design. So we will be visiting those intersections, particularly the ones with the left turn lanes. And if they warrant a protected left turn arrow, then we work with the city and work on what operation that'll be. So yes, that's something that I can't say that yes or no right now, but that's something we definitely look at when we do our design work.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Rivka, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Can we go back to the question of turning the intersection of Emlyn and Lincoln into a four-way intersection?
Yes, certainly.
I don't understand how that works, given that Ellet also intersects there. It's really a five-way.
Yeah, Elliot. Yeah, that's a good question, Rivka. I appreciate you bringing that up. We definitely saw that as part of the equation. And we'll have to work with the city on this too as part of the design. Elliot, we would have to, and we would recommend to turn one way south away from the intersection to get that intersection to the way we were looking to do it as a four-way traditional intersection.
That's a real problem for the stream of traffic coming from the synagogue there.
Okay, it's duly noted. We definitely will take a look at that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in our community meeting we had, we asked for raised pedestrian crossings, illuminated pedestrian crossings, bump outs, but I didn't hear any mention of those in this meeting. I want to know why that is.
Yeah, I'll touch on it and then I'll defer to either the city or PennDOT if they want to add. Yeah, there are just additional treatments, additional funding that aren't part of the particular grant money that they have. That, again, like the roundabout that we talked about, those particular treatments would need particular projects that may be solely focused on those particular types of treatment, as opposed to the grant money that is allotted right now for this work. They weren't part of that particular scope to do that and requirement to do that. But definitely treatments that should still be considered, or can be considered, more long term. I don't think it's out of the question. It's just it involves a lot of additional work, additional survey, additional studies, drainage, things like that. That was out of the scope of those that grant funding.
You know, given that it looks like the roundabout is probably out of the price range, I know that once these short-term measures are in, I think that cars are going to be traveling slower on Lincoln Drive, and pedestrians are going to be more likely to actually want to walk on the sidewalks by Lincoln Drive. So if we could add those pedestrian treatments to the long-term plan, I think that would be the thing that we would very most want to happen if there's funding.
I mean, hey Vince, I'll take it. I mean, the reason we're doing the daylighting at the intersection and all that and not doing the bump outs is because of the cost. When you start to take a look at the grade, which way the water's flowing, it's additional inlets, additional cost to the project that we did not originally put in. So we're doing the best we can with the funds we got. And that doesn't mean we can't come in the future with a separate project to add them on. But right now, our goal is to try to improve the safety of the corridor, but we can always come back to improve it even more.
Sure, that's understandable. Thank you.
Adina, question?
Yes, I know that it's not this project, but the part of Lincoln Drive that is south of this, when you go into the city, the speed is sometimes very dangerous, and trucks which are not allowed to drive there, and I don't know what a way of enforcing that. So who's in charge of looking into that? The speed and the dangers of the speed and the trucks in that part. I know it's not what we're talking about today, but I would just like to know who can address that.
So speeds, as we said, the city has been trying to petition for us to be allowed to put speed cameras throughout the city.
Okay.
Not just on Roosevelt Boulevard, realizing that trying to pull a car over on Lincoln Drive is kind of dangerous, so that the police officers don't have. And if you notice, we did a lot of work on Roosevelt Boulevard, creating pockets for them to be able to pull cars over, things like that. The other thing is that radar, local municipality cannot use radar. A radar can only be used by the state police. So we will have to make arrangements for a state trooper to come in to do the things and do it. I would also say that we did this on Henry Avenue, and we had a group up there where everybody was saying all the people outside the city were speeding. 90% of the tickets were given to City of Philadelphia residents. So I'm not denying it. The improvements south in this section were done by the city in conjunction with PennDOT. It was CalAir, we talked. We did the overhead signals. We did the high friction surfaces. We put in delineators. We put in the soft rumbles. And I know somebody mentioned, the streets department even proposed a road diet on Lincoln Drive. It will not work. It would literally put so much traffic on Henry Avenue that Henry Avenue would fail. So it's not like we did not look at it. It just happens to do when we do our regional model, when we do things like this, we'll do a regional model where it shows the cars will go. It was just creating such a chaos in another area. So we're just trying to create the safest road we can here while we can. And again, we want speed cameras everywhere. Philadelphia, the streets department, along with the Bike Coalition and the Philadelphia Parking Authority, did a tour down to Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. has speed cameras, had red light cameras, has stop cameras, has bus cameras, and has school bus cameras and school zone cameras. So, and they write 30,000 tickets a week. So we said we want the same thing in Philadelphia.
Okay, thank you.
I'll probably be hate for saying that, but yeah, it's the only. I mean, Roosevelt Boulevard, and Nicole can speak, because she has the numbers in it. We had a 60% crash reduction on Roosevelt Boulevard just on speed cameras, so it speaks for itself. It works. I mean, on work zones, on PennDOT work zones, we've had a crash reduction. It works. It's just and we're not going, we're just ticketing a car. We don't care who's driving and all that. We're just, you're just doing something wrong.
Okay.
Vince, do we have time for 2 more questions? We have 2 more hands raised, or
Certainly.
okay, Claude, and then Toby.
Hey, thank you, everyone. This has been really informative. I just wanted to raise that the intersections of McCallum and Carpenter Lane, both at Lincoln Drive, they're both pretty close to C.W. Henry, one of the local elementaries, and they're used very heavily by parents walking their kids to school or kids walking alone. I don't remember hearing much said about Carpenter, so I just wanted to, raise that special attention should be paid to those two, because as it is, they're, the easiest to cross currently, which isn't saying a ton, but, they're used very heavily by families.
Okay, duly noted. Thanks,
Hey,
Claude.
well, Claude, can I ask a question? Are you saying that does the school front that right there?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Does the school front right there? Like, is the school right there or is it a block away?
It's like 2 blocks away or so.
Okay. All right.
But, half the neighborhood has to cross Lincoln Drive somehow, and people tend to funnel to those 2 streets.
Okay. We'll look at it. We'll discuss it some more.
Thank you.
Toby, you're up.
Great, thank you. Thank you for all of this information. I just have a question about, this is not about Lincoln Drive, but it's generally about 4-way stop signs, which I understand you are, I'm assuming it's an experiment at Mount Pleasant and Emlyn, but that's what, because the lights are still there. So my question is, given maybe my assumption is wrong, but how does one evaluate whether a 4-way stop sign is intersection is working as intended, and is that going to be a permanent feature of Mount Pleasant and Emlyn?
So you're right, it's a temporary solution, and it was something we had a conversation. Actually, Ann held a meeting on that whole thing about traffic calming Emlyn, and one of the ideas was to convert some of the signals to always to slow the traffic down. It's also some of the suggestions out there that we're still studying and going back and forth in. It was to add additional always on Emlyn. So we are looking at that, of how to add additional always to slow the traffic down on Emlyn. So I would say, Toby, I normally don't go out asking for additional additional work, but I do come to communities and I get additional work. So it wasn't like I said, we listen to the communities, the streets department listens to the community. It seems to be the reason I did not have the signals removed and they're bagged and a stop sign put in was because we're getting feedback. So if you can tell the council member, or you can tell Ann, I hate the idea or I love the idea. I don't know how else to put it. So
Although the reason I'm asking
we're
is because
still evaluating what we're going to do there.
yeah, Richard, I'm asking because in the discussion tonight, you've talked about data, the data about this, how to do a left turn lane. You talk about data, and you just mentioned the way you just talked about this.
So,
if we like it or don't. So I just my question.
Interestingly enough, yes. Then and Vince Carbone can probably he knows a lot more than I does. But so in all ways the crash severity, if I'm saying this right, Vince, correct me if I say anything wrong, is usually less because vehicles are traveling at a lesser speed. It takes 2 people to make a mistake versus a signal where it takes 1. So let's just say you got a green light, you're gunning, you know what happens as soon as you see a yellow? People gun it, somebody anticipates, they cut it short, all of a sudden you have a crash. So the severity of of signals is greater than that of stop signs. So usually what we try to do this. And then traditionally too is people tend to traverse stop signs, even though, whatever you want to call it, blank Philly roll, Mount Airy Philly roll, whatever you want to call the stops, but you're going at a lesser speed. You're going, you tend to be going 5 miles or less, as much as, we all get trained that you stop, you count 1, 2, and then you go. So the crashes and severity tend to be less at a stop sign than an all-way. And that is what we're doing here. Unfortunately, I will tell you for the city and PennDOT, for us to do our crash data, it takes years because we don't get right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vince. We're getting 2022 data right now, so we're always somewhere between 6 to 9 months behind on the data, and I don't want to wait 6 to 9 months. So a lot of times, what we depend on is the community to tell us how they feel it's working. Did I say anything wrong, Vince, that you want to correct me in, or?
Oh, no, it was excellent. You know, the one thing that a lot of people have been trying to, I think you just answered a question about this the other day, that, you know, that if it's a signalized corridor, one thing you don't want to do is mix in stop signs and traffic signals on a corridor, because if a driver is going down the block and there's a stop sign, yet there's a signal on the next block, they're going to pay attention to that signal and not the stop sign. And you have a lot of running stop signs. So a lot of people ask that question, and there's a reason for it. So you get severe crashes when you mix the two.
Yes, lots of work needs to be done on Umblin. But that's enough for another night. But we're pretty desperate for it because it feeds right into Lincoln, and there are major crashes there almost every other week.
We've got a great guy working on it. So I tell you that, and I'm not just saying this, the PennDOT and the streets department and the city have the best relationship that we've had in the 32 years that I've worked.
Oh, that's really great to hear.
It's the truth. So I'm not just saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo that because remember, I mean, the city of Philadelphia is the only city that's allowed that's been working with PennDOT on traffic calming state roads to lower our fatalities. So it's, you know, we're setting the trend. Pittsburgh is actually looking at us to see how they can work better with PennDOT to also implement similar things.
That's true.
No, it's fabulous.
So one of the questions that's in here, Vince, is the timeline. So Sharon, can you jump in and talk about the timeline for our work, and then Vince, if you could jump in for the timeline for the long term, if there is one.
Yeah, so this plan that we were all looking at today, it's already been submitted into construction. The work is going to be prioritized, as Vince mentioned earlier. We're looking at fall of 2023. So, you know, construction already has it. You guys will likely start to see improvements, or, you know, construction crews out on Lincoln Drive in the very near future. And we hope to have all the signing, pavement marking, and, you know, rumble strip work done before temperatures get too low. There are some things that are limited due to weather, but our goal is to have this work completed by end of fall.
And then the long term, Vince, for the signal work, that's I mentioned construction probably 2025 and 26. So that's a little bit out, still in the design process.
And the other one I can chime in, and the city put in for a grant, and I was actually talking with Ashwin Patel today about getting some or releasing some RLE funds, which will be hopefully released in January, for us to then do the speed tables and the feedback signs as part of that. So we're hoping, if everything goes good and the RLE funds get released in January, we get the funding. So we're following in the spring, summer, to do the speed cushions, as Vince put it in his presentation. So
fabulous. Well, everyone, I think that's all we have for tonight. If anybody has questions that they still need answers, they can email me at ann.dicker@gmail.com. And I just want to thank everyone at the streets department, everyone at PennDOT, Vince, DeFlavia, of traffic planning and design, and everybody who's worked together so much on this very, very complex project. And I think that we are going to make Lincoln Drive a lot safer, and I really, really appreciate your work. So
Thank you.
without anything, good night, everyone.
Good night, and thank you for the committee too.
Thanks.